Peace found in an apocalyptic time. Please welcome Brian Prioleau. 6 years of French? 6 years of French. Can't speak the language, but can pronounce some French words.
It's a great way to start because I've made a living writing for 40 years. And I've written fiction for 40 years, and I've never done this.
Oh.
So go easy on me, please.
You'll get a hug after.
I've used them before, but never mind. The name of the story is The Originate Plane. It begins with a quote from the Labor Gabala, which is the Celtic Book of Conquests. At that time, there were only treeless and grassless plains, 3 lakes and 9 rivers, but during Partholon's time, 4 plains were cleared and 7 new lakes were formed. Before his time, there was no tilling of the soil. After 3 centuries, the population had grown to 5,000, but on the tercentenary of Partholon's landing, his people were wiped out by an epidemic, gathering to die together on the original plain. A virus is like a salt, maddeningly simple. As a salt reconciles the opposed ends of the pH scale, forcing acid and alkali into some form of balance and stability, a virus forces reconciliation between the orderly functionality contained within a cell's walls and the tumult and disorder without. Both tumult and order are required, but they cannot coexist. A virus is the vehicle that permits their reconciliation of sorts. A virus can only multiply inside a living cell and is absolutely dependent upon the host cell's synthetic and energy-yielding structures. But it destroys the host cell by reproducing and must search for another vehicle, and another, and another. Viral genomes will sometimes encode proteins that interact with the host cell defense mechanisms against invading infectious agents, in effect infiltrating and subverting those defenses. The ability of a virus to encode these proteins is a direct statement of the virulence of any virus. The more effective the encoding, the more virulent the virus. The virus that plagued us was startlingly effective at this encoding and unstoppable as a result. Any attempt to rid the body of the virus was met with a mutation. Every attempt to isolate the virus within a population or a geographical area was met with a mutation. Initially, the virus required actual physical contact, but eventually mutated into a form that could be borne thousands of miles upon the wind, that could lie dormant indefinitely in soil and ice and vegetation, that could survive in seawater and be carried along warm and cold currents alike. The entire human race swallowing thousands of years of ingrained migratory habit and predilection, consciously, rigorously refuting the persistent dream of someplace else, stood still, in place, no movement for a dozen years. But the virus mutated and came to us. It was then that each of us, in our own way, admitted defeat. There were those who found comfort in this defeat, in knowing that it had not come as a result of our own bad behavior, but rather because of an unknowing, insensate microorganism that needs only to propagate. If no blame can be assigned, no apology need be made. It is simply the slippery balance of life. There were never any guarantees. There are those who wove endless cloths from the looms of conspiracy, each row with another imagined enemy, another they. They were impotent, blindly striking against the powerful. They were the powerful seeking to eliminate, finally and thoroughly, the weak so that they could have the world to themselves. They were some locally demonized minority whose plan for revenge had gone horribly wrong and global. It was an era of unrelenting pogroms against uncountable populations, with some regions seeing almost as much death from violence as from the virus. When it was pointed out that they had to endure what we all had to endure, namely the unbearable sadness of burying their own children, the conspiracy weavers never entertained any doubt that they could hate so profoundly. It was obvious and self-evident. There are those who ascended into religious observance, becoming acutely devout on a minute-to-minute basis to the point of exhaustion. Of course, we all became more devout in those years, but some use it as a platform for intense self-consciousness, unrelenting self-examination to the point of stasis. And it was the age of the shaman and the charlatan, when heresy and screed seemed to congeal into a viscous, endless, pointless prayer that neither comforted nor revealed much of anything. So many spent years of their foreshortened lives searching for answers in absolution, but they still could not disinter any guarantees. There were those who ascended into the aesthetic, elevating the contemplation of beauty and its antithesis into a purposefully godless religion. They could not escape their own isolation. They could not forget. There were those who embraced various forms of nihilism and oblivion through sex, narcotics, and countless other afflictions. We pitied them because they could not remember. There were those who chose isolation. This was increasingly easy as more people died off and vast tracts of land reverted to the wilds. Those who chose this life could not escape the virus, however, and they died quickly and alone. As populations dwindled to outposts, we struggled to retain our humanity. It was hardest on the young. It is said that optimism is adaptive, for if the superb consciousness of the human race was intent upon a realistic appraisal of our prospects, we would barely have survived a few generations, much less 100 millennia. But optimism was a luxury not allowed the young. As the virus passed through us, we felt a need to develop some idea, some strategy to make the inevitable more bearable for us and for them. Many ideas were proposed and discussed, but finally agreement was found for the most natural and logical idea, that we should all end where we began, that we should complete the circle. So we decided we should all gather on the originate plane and build a small city for this last generation, small and functional, without regard to continuation, but as an acceptance. We knew instinctively that the idea would appeal to the natural idealism of our children, just becoming aware of the world around them, eager to make connections while things collapse. The plans are in motion. Resources for once plentiful are being diverted. Architects are bent over their blueprints. The poets are staring out their windows. The politicians are at bay. The farmers are in negotiations. It will take almost 10 years before the Great Migration begins, but we believe that we have that much time. When a virus multiplies, the initial action is to physically separate the viral genome from its protective shell, a process known as uncoating. So we learn from the virus. After watching it adapt to all our processes and predilections, we learn to shed what is unnecessary and obscurant. We will stand on the originate plane together, the apotheosis, the accepting, the last.